The screaming began at matins. Brother Thomas Blackwood jolted awake in his narrow cell as unholy shrieks echoed through the stone corridors of Blackmoor Abbey. The sound was wrong, not the cry of physical pain he knew from the infirmary, but something far more primal, something that made his blood freeze in his veins. No human throat should make such sounds. Thomas grabbed his woolen robe and rushed toward the source, the Abbey's infirmary, where he served as physician monk. The October wind howled through the ancient stones, carrying with it the scent of coming winter and something else, something that reminded him of the charnel house behind the Abbey walls. The screams came from the isolation chamber. "Brother Thomas, thank God you've come." Brother Marcus, the night watch, stood trembling outside the heavy oak door. "The boy, the shepherd boy, he's—" "Unlock it," Thomas commanded, though every instinct screamed against it. Inside, young Willem writhed on the straw pallet, his back arched impossibly, muscles rigid, with spasms that looked like no earthly ailment Thomas had studied in his years learning the healing arts. The boy's eyes had rolled back, showing only white, and foam flecked with blood bubbled from his mouth. But it was the sound Willem made that turned Thomas's bowels to water, a low, continuous growling that rose and fell like the breathing of some massive beast. "Water!" Willem suddenly gasped, his eyes snapping forward with terrifying clarity. "Please! Water!" Thomas moved toward the clay pitcher, but the moment Willem saw the liquid, his entire body convulsed with such violence that the wooden bedframe creaked. The boy's face contorted with pure, animal terror. "Get it away!" Willem shrieked, pressing himself against the stone wall. "The water burns! It burns like hellfire!" Thomas had never seen hydrophobia so severe. In his medical training, he'd studied texts describing such symptoms, but witnessing it— "When did this begin?" Thomas asked Brother Marcus, not taking his eyes off Willem. 3 days past, when they brought him from the village. Wolf attack, they said. The bite seemed minor, barely broke the skin on his forearm, but yesterday he grew agitated, speaking of strange dreams. Today, Marcus crossed himself, today, the demons took hold. Demons. Thomas kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. In the great medical schools of Salerno and Montpellier, scholars whispered of diseases that affected the mind through the body. But here, in this remote Yorkshire abbey, such thoughts bordered on heresy. Willem's growling stopped. In the sudden silence, the boy turned toward them with movements too fluid, too predatory for any human child. When he spoke, his voice carried a cadence that raised the hair on Thomas's neck. "I smell your fear, brother. It's sweet, like fresh blood on snow." "The boy needs exorcism," Brother Marcus whispered. "This is no natural sickness." But Thomas had noticed something the others missed. Willem's bite wound, supposedly minor, showed clear puncture marks. 4 distinct tears in the flesh, now festering with angry red inflammation that tracked up the boy's arm like poison through his veins. "Fetch the abbot," Thomas said quietly, "and bring Elena from the village. Tell her Brother Thomas has need of her healing knowledge." As Brother Marcus hurried away, Thomas remained alone with Willem. The boy had grown eerily still, but his eyes never left Thomas's face. "You see it, don't you, brother?" Willem whispered. "You see that this is no demon's work. Something else moves in my blood. Something hungry." Before Thomas could respond, Willem's body seized again. This time, when the spasms passed, the boy was unconscious, but breathing with the deep, rhythmic pattern of a predator in sleep. Thomas examined the wound more closely by candlelight. The bite marks were deeper than first appeared, and the flesh around them had taken on an unnatural pallor. But it was the smell that convinced him this was no ordinary infection. A sweet, cloying odor that reminded him of rotting fruit mixed with something wild and feral. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Abbot Cornelius entered, his gaunt frame casting dancing shadows in the candlelight. Behind him came Elena, the village herbalist whose knowledge of local plants and animal behavior had proven invaluable to the abbey's healing work. Brother Thomas, the abbot's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Brother Marcus tells me the boy suffers demonic possession. Father Abbot, I believe. You believe? The abbot's eyes flashed. In matters of possession, we do not believe. We know. The Church teaches us clearly about such afflictions. Elena stepped forward, her weathered face grave. Father Abbot, with respect, I've seen this before. 3 villages to the north have reported similar afflictions. All began with wolf attacks. Wolves are instruments of Satan, the abbot declared. Through them, demons enter our world to torment the faithful. But Thomas caught Eleanor's eye, and in her gaze he saw knowledge. Dangerous knowledge that challenged everything the Church taught about disease and possession. Willem stirred on his pallet. When his eyes opened, they fixed immediately on Elena with unsettling intensity. The wolf woman, he whispered, his voice carrying that same predatory cadence. You know what's coming, don't you? You've seen the signs. The pack grows hungry, and winter drives them close to men. Elena went pale. The wolves. They've been acting strangely, moving in daylight, attacking without provocation. And there was something else. Speak, Thomas urged. We found a dead wolf 3 days past. Its body was wrong, covered in its own spittle, eyes clouded white. It had attacked a tree until its teeth broke, clawing at the bark until its paws were bloody stumps. The abbot's face darkened. Enough of this superstitious prattle. The boy requires spiritual intervention, not folk tales about mad animals. But as if responding to their conversation, Willem began to laugh, a sound that started human but descended into something that belonged in no Christian throat. The laughter rose until it filled the chamber, echoing off stone walls like the howling of a wolf pack under a moonless sky. Then, as suddenly as it began, the laughter stopped. Willem looked directly at Thomas, and when he spoke, his voice was perfectly lucid, perfectly human, and more terrifying than any demonic growl. Brother Thomas, I can feel it spreading, like fire in my veins, but cold. So cold. It whispers to me of things I should not know, about the taste of warm blood, about the soft sounds people make when they're afraid. The boy's eyes filled with tears that tracked down his fever-flushed cheeks. I'm still here, brother, still Willem, but something else shares this body now, and it's so very, very hungry. As if summoned by his words, the distant howling of wolves echoed across the Yorkshire moors, carried on the night wind through the abbey's windows. But these howls sounded different, more purposeful, more organized, almost like they were answering a call. Thomas felt the first tendrils of a terrible understanding creeping into his mind. This was no demonic possession. This was something else entirely. Something that could spread. Something that could multiply. And if he was right, Willem was only the beginning. She murmured, privately. They withdrew to the herb garden, where Eleanor's expression conveyed the gravity of what she'd discovered. The wolf that attacked Mary, we found its carcass this morning. Like the other one, it was mad. But Thomas, there's something else. I've been tracking the attacks, mapping them against the moon phases and the wolf's normal hunting patterns. She produced a rough drawing on parchment, circles marking villages, lines showing wolf pack movements, dates written in careful script. Look at the pattern. The attacks aren't random. They're spreading outward from something, some central source in the deep woods. And the wolves, they're not hunting for food. They're hunting to spread whatever madness afflicts them. Thomas studied the map, his medical training warring with a growing dread. How many villages have reported attacks? 7 in the past month, all following the same pattern. Wolves attacking during daylight, biting but not killing, then retreating. And in every village, those who survived the initial attack. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. They developed the same symptoms, the same dreams, the same hunger. A scream echoed from the infirmary. Not the sharp cry of pain, but the sustained howl they'd come to associate with the afflicted. Mary was calling to someone, or something, in a voice that carried further than any human throat should manage. Brother Thomas, Brother Marcus appeared at a run. Willem has broken free of his restraints. He's trying to reach the main infirmary, and his strength, it's not natural. They raced back to find chaos. Willem had somehow torn through rope restraints that should have held a grown man. He stood pressed against the oak door of his chamber, calling out in words that sounded almost like wolf speech. Low, guttural vocalizations that made the other patients cower in their beds. From the main infirmary, Mary answered in the same impossible language. They're communicating, Thomas breathed, the full horror of his realization hitting him. Whatever this is, it's creating some kind of pack bond between them. Elena gripped his arm. Thomas, there's something else you need to know. I spoke with Mary's parents before coming here. The wolf that attacked her, it wasn't behaving like a mad animal. It was methodical. It bit Mary and then withdrew, as if it had accomplished exactly what it intended. You're suggesting the wolves are spreading this deliberately? I'm suggesting whatever controls the wolves wants this madness to spread. And if that's true... Elena's face went pale. Winter festival is in 3 days. The entire village will gather at the abbey for evening mass. If more infected arrive... Thomas felt ice form in his veins. The pieces were fitting together into a pattern too terrible to contemplate. This wasn't random disease or demonic possession. It was something far more systematic and far more dangerous. A new voice joined the chorus from within the abbey walls. A third patient had arrived while they spoke. A woodsman named Garrett, brought by his wife with familiar bite marks on his leg. Through the stone walls, 3 voices now called to each other in that impossible wolf speech, their vocalizations growing stronger and more coordinated with each passing hour. Thomas made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. Elena, can you show me where the attacks originated, the source point on your map? The deep woods near the old Roman ruins. But Thomas, no one goes there after dark. Even before the attacks, the wolves gathered there in numbers we'd never seen. Then we go during daylight. If there's a source to this madness, something that's driving the wolves to spread it systematically, we need to understand what we're facing. Elena stared at him. And if the abbot discovers you've left the abbey to pursue superstitious investigation instead of focusing on spiritual solutions... Thomas listened to the growing chorus of wolf speech echoing through the abbey halls. Soon there would be more voices joining that unholy choir. And when winter festival brought the entire village within these walls... Then God forgive me, he said quietly, but I choose knowledge over obedience. As if responding to his words, the 3 afflicted patients suddenly fell silent. In the unnatural quiet that followed, a new sound drifted across the moors. The distant howling of wolves gathering in numbers that defied every natural pattern Elena had ever documented. They were coming closer to the abbey, and they were bringing something with them. The expedition to the ruins revealed a horror beyond Thomas's darkest imaginings. They departed at first light, Thomas carrying his medical satchel, and Elena armed with her intimate knowledge of the wilderness paths. The October morning was crisp and clear, but even in daylight the forest felt wrong, too quiet, too empty of normal animal sounds. There, Elena pointed to a depression in the woods, where ancient Roman stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. The attacks all radiate from this point. As they approached, the smell hit them first, the same sweet, feral odor that clung to the bite wounds, but concentrated here until it was almost overwhelming. Elena covered her nose with her cloak, but Thomas forced himself to breathe normally, documenting every detail for the journal hidden in his satchel. The ruins themselves were not extensive, the remains of what might once have been a small temple or shrine. But scattered around the stones lay evidence of a gathering that violated every natural law Thomas understood. Wolf carcasses, dozens of them, arranged in crude patterns around the central stones. But these were not the bodies of animals that had died from the same madness affecting Willem, Mary, and Garrett. These wolves had been deliberately killed, their throats torn out with precision that spoke of ritual rather than random violence. "Mother of God," Elena whispered. "What could have done this?" Thomas knelt beside the nearest carcass, forcing himself to examine it with clinical detachment. The killing wounds were too large for wolf teeth, too precise for bear claws. They looked almost human in their deliberation, but no human hand could have torn flesh with such efficiency. At the center of the ruins, carved into the ancient Roman stone, fresh scratches formed crude symbols, spirals and angular marks that seemed to writhe in the shifting light filtering through the forest canopy. "Elena, look at this." Thomas traced the marks with one finger, careful not to actually touch them. These weren't made by animal claws. They're too regular, too purposeful. Then what? A sound from the edge of the clearing cut her off. Not quite a growl, not quite human speech, but something that carried elements of both. They turned slowly, every instinct screaming at them to run. At the forest's edge stood a figure that had once been human. Thomas recognized him, Brother Benedict, who had disappeared from the abbey 3 weeks past during a herb-gathering expedition. But the thing wearing Benedict's brown robes moved with fluid, predatory grace that belonged to no human frame. Its eyes had taken on a golden cast that reflected light like an animal's. And when it smiled, its teeth had grown sharp and numerous. "Brother Thomas," it said in Benedict's voice, though the words carried undertones of growling. "How good of you to visit our sacred place." "Benedict," Thomas said carefully, positioning himself between the creature and Elena. "What happened to you?" "I was chosen," Benedict replied, circling them with movements too smooth and coordinated for human joints. "As you will be chosen, as all must be chosen when the winter drives the blessings. Close to human settlements." Elena gripped Thomas's arm. "The bite marks on its arms. They're healed, but the pattern—" Thomas saw it too. Benedict's forearms bore dozens of bite scars in neat rows, as if he had deliberately offered his flesh to infected animals. But the wounds had healed with unnatural speed, leaving only pale marks that formed intricate patterns across his skin. "The wolves are not mad," Benedict continued, his voice taking on a sing-song quality that made Thomas's skin crawl. "They are blessed. They carry the gift from the deep places, the ancient places where the old gods still remember what men were, before they forgot how to hunt properly. This is sickness, Benedict, not blessing. I can help you." Benedict's laughter cut him off, the same descending, inhuman sound they'd heard from Willem and Mary. "Help? Brother Thomas, you understand so little. The sickness is what you call human. The blessing is what we become when we remember our true nature." The creature that had been Benedict took a step closer, and Thomas saw that its fingernails had grown into claw-like points. "Winter festival is tomorrow night," Benedict said conversationally. "The entire village will gather in the abbey for evening mass. Such a perfect opportunity for sharing the blessing. The pack grows hungry, Brother Thomas, and your abbey's walls will not keep us out when we choose to enter. Thomas felt Elena trembling beside him, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. The other villages, the ones that were attacked first, what happened to them? Benedict's smile widened, showing those two numerous teeth. Would you like to see? Against every survival instinct, Thomas found himself nodding. Whatever this was, whatever was spreading through the wolves and into human settlements, he needed to understand it if he had any hope of stopping it. Benedict gestured for them to follow, leading them deeper into the woods, along paths that seemed to twist and fold in ways that defied the morning sunlight. The trees grew thicker, older, and the silence became so complete that Thomas could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. They emerged into a clearing that had once been the village of Little Bromwick. Thomas had visited here 2 summers past to treat an outbreak of fever. It had been a thriving settlement of perhaps 40 souls, farmers and shepherds who had worked the same land for generations. Now it stood empty, but not abandoned. The houses remained intact, but they had been modified. Doorways had been widened, apparently by claw and tooth rather than tools. Windows had been torn larger, creating openings that would allow passage for things larger than human frames. And everywhere, carved into door frames and windowsills, were the same spiral symbols they'd seen at the ruins. They chose transformation, Benedict said proudly. All of them. The blessing spread from house to house during their harvest festival, and by dawn, they had all remembered their true nature. Where are they now? Elena whispered. Hunting, learning, becoming what they were, always meant to be. Benedict turned to face them directly, and Thomas saw that the creature's pupils had taken on an elongated, distinctly non-human shape. As you will become, Brother Thomas, the pack has need of your healing knowledge. When the transformation spreads, there will be injuries, complications. Your skills will be valuable to the new order. Thomas felt pieces clicking together in his mind. Not supernatural revelation, but the cold logic of medical observation. This is not demonic possession. It's a disease, something that affects the brain, changes behavior, but leaves intelligence intact. A disease that improves us, Benedict corrected, that returns us to what we were before civilization made us weak and prey-like. And the wolves are our brothers in blessing. They carry the gift from the ancient places and share it freely with any who prove worthy. Benedict's expression became almost fond. The old Roman shrine marks one such place. There are others, deeper in the wildlands, where the gift has slept since the world was young. Elena stepped forward, her herbalist's mind clearly working through implications. The systematic attacks, the pattern of spread. You're deliberately infecting human settlements. We are sharing paradise, Benedict said simply. Soon, when enough have been blessed, the hunger will drive us to establish proper hunting grounds. No more scratching at dirt for grain, no more huddling behind walls in fear of the dark. We will take our rightful place as apex predators. Thomas felt the full scope of the horror settling into his bones. This wasn't random infection. It was organized, purposeful, and spreading with the efficiency of a military campaign. And tomorrow night, when the entire village gathered at the abbey, we have to warn them, he said quietly to Elena. Benedict heard, and his smile became predatory. Warn them of what, Brother Thomas? That they are about to be offered transformation into something greater than they have ever imagined? That their children will never again know hunger or cold or the fear that drives lesser creatures? The creature began circling them again, and Thomas realized with growing alarm that other shapes were moving in the tree line, forms that might once have been human, but now moved with that same fluid, predatory grace. Run, he whispered to Elena. There is nowhere to run that we cannot follow, Benedict said conversationally. But we will not force the blessing upon you today, Brother Thomas. You must see the truth for yourself, must choose transformation willingly, or your medical knowledge will not properly transfer to your blessed form. And if I refuse? Benedict's golden eyes fixed on his with terrifying intensity. Then tomorrow night, when the pack enters your abbey during winter festival mass, you will watch every person you have sworn to protect receive the blessing whether they choose it or not. And then, Brother Thomas, when you are the last unchanged human in all of Yorkshire, you will beg us for transformation. The creature stepped back, melting into the forest shadows with impossible silence. The other shapes in the tree line vanished as well, leaving Thomas and Elena alone in the empty village, with only the wind through modified doorways to break the silence. We have to get back, Elena said urgently. We have to warn the abbot, warn the village. He won't believe us, Thomas said heavily. He'll say we're mad, or that demons have deceived us with illusions. Then what do we do? Thomas looked around the abandoned village, noting details that his medical training insisted he document. The systematic modifications to structures, the organized nature of the transformation, the intelligence behind the spread pattern, all of it pointed to something far more dangerous than random disease or demonic possession. We prepare, he said, finally. Whatever this blessing truly is, it spreads through bite wounds. If we can prevent exposure during the festival. You're thinking like a physician again, Elena said with relief. What do you need? Thomas began walking back toward the forest path, his mind racing through possibilities. Wine, salt, cloths for binding wounds, and weapons, though I suspect normal steel won't be enough if Benedict spoke truly about their physical capabilities. The silver chalices from the Abbey's treasury, Elena suggested, if the old stories about blessed silver hold any truth. As they made their way back through the forest, Thomas felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. Tomorrow night, when the village gathered for winter festival mass, he would have to choose between his oath of obedience to church authority and his duty as a healer to protect human life. Behind them, echoing through the empty houses of Little Bromwick, something that might once have been human laughter drifted on the wind, followed by the coordinated howling of a pack that had grown far too large and far too intelligent for any natural explanation. The hunt was coming to Blackmoor Abbey, and Thomas was running out of time to prepare for an enemy that challenged everything he understood about the nature of disease, humanity, and the thin line between civilization and the wild darkness that waited just beyond the firelight. Children's laughter, no dogs barking, no calls of vendors preparing for the festival. Just silence, broken only by an occasional sound that might have been singing but carried too many harmonies for human voices. How many made it to the Abbey before, he began. Perhaps 50 souls, Elena said. The rest. She shuddered. When I went to gather my healing supplies, I found houses with their doors torn wide. But no bodies, Thomas. No signs of struggle, just those symbols carved into every doorframe, and clothes scattered about as if people had simply molted out of them. From within the Abbey, the sound that had haunted Thomas for days began again, the wolf speech of the afflicted calling to each other. But now it carried new harmonies, as if answering calls from beyond the Abbey walls. Willem, Mary, and Garrett had been joined by 3 more villagers during the night. People who had arrived at the Abbey claiming wolf attacks but showing no visible wounds. Thomas had isolated them immediately, recognizing the subtle signs, the 2 bright eyes, the fluid movements, the sweet feral scent that clung to their clothes. They're inside the walls, he said quietly. Some of the blessed ones. They came disguised as refugees, but they're here to ensure tonight's festival proceeds according to their plans. Elena gripped his arm. The abbot, does he know? The abbot believes we face a spiritual crisis that can be resolved through prayer and exorcism. He's ordered special evening mass for tonight, bringing every remaining villager into the main chapel. Thomas felt sick. We'll be giving the pack exactly what they want. Every uninfected human gathered in one place. Then we stop the mass. On what grounds? That I've diagnosed a supernatural disease that transforms humans into predatory pack animals? Thomas shook his head. He'd have me confined for madness or heresy. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their conversation. A rider approached the abbey at full gallop. Brother Francis from the abbey at Whitmore, 20 miles south. His horse was lathered with sweat and foam, driven to exhaustion by desperate flight. "Brother Thomas," Francis called out as he practically fell from his mount. "Whitmore Abbey has fallen, the entire brotherhood, transformed by some unholy plague that spreads through bite and claw." Thomas felt the last piece of his terrible puzzle click into place. "Tell me exactly what happened." 3 nights passed, refugees came seeking shelter. They spoke of wolf attacks, showed fresh wounds. We took them in, tended their injuries as Christian charity demands. Francis's voice shook. By the second night, they had begun changing. Not possession, transformation. Their bodies altered, became predatory, powerful, and they spread the change to others through bites that they claimed were accidents. How many escaped? I alone, and only because I hid in the bell tower when the transformation reached its peak. I watched, Brother Thomas. I watched my brothers become something else, something that retained their intelligence, their memories, but served new instincts entirely. Elena stepped forward. Did they kill the transformed ones? No. That's what made it so terrifying. They welcomed the change, embraced it. By dawn, 20 monks had become something else entirely, and they spoke of this as evolution, as returning to humanity's natural state. Francis gripped Thomas's robe. They sent me to carry word to other abbeys. They want the transformation to spread, and they're using the church's own charity and hospitality to accomplish it. Thomas felt pieces of his desperate plan crystallizing. Brother Francis, I need you to speak with Abbot Cornelius. Tell him exactly what you've told me. He may not believe theories about disease, but he cannot ignore the testimony of a brother monk about supernatural transformation. As Francis hurried toward the abbey's main buildings, Thomas turned to Elena. Can you identify the infected villagers among the refugees? The ones who arrived claiming wolf attacks but show no wounds? I think so. There's something about their scent, their movement patterns. Then we separate them from the general population before evening mass. If we can prevent them from accessing the main chapel when the village gathers. Eleanor's expression was grim. Thomas, what if we're wrong? What if this really is demonic possession, and we're about to condemn innocent people based on medical theories that might be completely mistaken? Thomas looked toward the village, where smoke continued rising from chimneys, but no human activity was visible. Then, God forgive us both. But if I'm right, and we do nothing, by tomorrow morning, every human soul in Yorkshire will be part of their pack. The remainder of the day passed in desperate preparation. Thomas convinced Brother Marcus to help him inventory the abbey's medical supplies, claiming he was preparing for mass casualties during the evening's spiritual warfare. In truth, he was gathering everything that might serve as antiseptic: wine, salt, even the harsh soap used for laundry. Elena moved through the refugee population with subtle attention, identifying 6 individuals whose behavior patterns marked them as infected. They moved too smoothly, watched others with predatory focus, and carried that distinctive, sweet feral scent despite having bathed. Most tellingly, they showed no fear. While genuine refugees huddled together in terror, speaking in whispers about wolf attacks and vanished neighbors, the infected ones remained calm, almost expectant. As evening approached, Thomas made his final preparations. He had hidden knives taken from the kitchen throughout the main chapel, along with vessels of wine mixed with salt for emergency wound cleansing. Brother Francis had convinced Abbot Cornelius to allow armed guards in the chapel, not because the abbot believed in physical threat, but because Francis's testimony had shaken his confidence in purely spiritual solutions. The sun set with unnatural rapidity, and with the darkness came sounds from beyond the abbey walls that made every refugee cross themselves in terror. Howling, but organized, different voices calling and responding in patterns too complex for natural wolves. Brother Thomas, the abbot approached as Thomas made final arrangements in the chapel. Brother Francis has filled my mind with disturbing theories about the nature of our current trial. I confess, I no longer feel certain that prayer alone will prove sufficient. Father Abbot, I believe we face something that challenges our understanding of both medicine and theology. Whatever happens tonight, please trust that my actions serve the preservation of human life. The abbot studied Thomas's face in the candlelight. You speak as if you expect violence during Holy Mass. I pray I'm wrong, Father, but if I'm not. Thomas never finished the sentence, because at that moment, the howling outside the abbey walls stopped. In the sudden silence, a new sound began. The systematic striking of the abbey's outer gates by something far stronger than human hands. The iron portcullis, designed to withstand armed assault, began to bend under blows that rang like thunder through the evening air. "They're coming," Elena whispered, appearing at Thomas's side. "And they're not alone." Through the chapel's windows, shapes moved in the courtyard, forms that walked upright but moved with fluid, predatory grace. Some still wore the remnants of human clothing, while others had abandoned such pretenses entirely. At their head walked the creature that had once been Brother Benedict, its transformed features clearly visible in the torchlight. It raised something to its mouth, a horn carved from bone, and blew a note that seemed to reach directly into every human mind present. The refugees in the chapel began screaming, but the 6 that Elena had identified as infected did something far worse. They began laughing, and the sound was answered by voices from outside the abbey walls. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all raised in that same descending, inhuman harmony. "Bar the doors," Thomas shouted, abandoning any pretense of medical objectivity. "Everyone away from the windows." But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The infected refugees were already moving, their human disguises dropping away to reveal the predatory creatures they had become. And outside, the sound of splintering wood announced that the abbey's gates would not hold for much longer. The hunt had found them. And Thomas realized with crystal clarity that everything he had witnessed, everything he had studied and planned for, had been merely preparation for this moment, when human civilization would face its oldest nightmare made manifest and discover whether knowledge and courage could triumph over an enemy that challenged the very nature of what it meant to be human. The final battle for Blackmoor Abbey was about to begin. But in the flickering candlelight of the chapel, surrounded by terrified refugees and facing an enemy that defied every natural law he understood, Thomas felt something unexpected rising in his chest. Not fear, though fear was certainly present. Not despair, though the odds seemed impossible. Instead, he felt the cold, clear focus of a physician confronting a disease he finally understood, and the determination to use every tool at his disposal to protect the lives entrusted to his care. The Blessed Ones wanted to transform humanity into something else. Thomas would show them what humanity could become when driven to its limits. The real confrontation was just beginning.